Well, hello and welcome to the Waking Up Spiritually podcast. This is Wendy Rose Williams, and my website is wendyrosewilliams.com. And I'm a past life adventure guide. I help people release energy that's not serving them anymore. For example, pain, anxiety, depression. And Gregg Kirk is my wonderful co host, and he's now going to introduce himself as well as today's topic.
Hello, I'm Gregg Kirk. I am an energy worker, Lyme disease advocate, and you can find me at greggkirk.com. It's spelled GREGGKIRK.com. I also run weekly Sunday online group healing circles. So those are only $20. So come if you're having a tough week like we had this week. In fact, Wendy and I were just talking about this before we logged on today. The topic that we're going to be discussing today came up big in our online group healing circle. And I think it's just one of those kind of harmonic convergences, or how did you put it, Wendy? Like a human consciousness?
Like a mass consciousness, a collective consciousness can just bubble up and rise up.
Yes,
and we've also got some two super full moons this month. So just perfect time to release.
Right. So anyway, come join us every Sunday. But today's topic came up in that healing group. And our topic today is removing your resistance to spiritual growth or spirituality itself. So let me pull this up as I'm going to share my screen.
And while Gregg's doing that, I'll just mention you're certainly welcome to join us live in our Facebook group called Waking Up Spiritually. And we do archive all the podcasts at wakingupspiritually.com. So certainly you may be listening to us via one of the apps or via our YouTube channel, but it's also a visual podcast. So you're able to see it as a video too.
Yes. So, removing your resistance to spiritual growth. First of all, let's talk about what spiritual growth is, or spirituality, and how do you get there? So that's actually, I framed that loaded question on purpose, because that's usually what people do is, oh, I need to become more spiritual. I need to get there. Like it's a destination. Well, it's not a destination, and it's not a reward for any kind of spiritual achievements. It's an energetic state. It's what some people call a state of grace. And really, how you achieve it is by removing any blockages to the knowing of the Creator and yourself as a part of creation. Like I said, it's been described as a state of grace. It can be a state of bliss, and it's a state of true understanding of the nature of things. So it's not, I've heard this also, Wayne Dyer, I believe, it was describing happiness in the same way, which is another state. And he said, people ask me, what's the road to happiness? And he said, happiness is the road. In order to be happy, you just remove the impediments to it. So it's not something you need to climb to the mountaintop to achieve. So how does one move into a spiritual state? So here's a bit of encouragement for everyone is you're born into it, unless barring some unusual circumstance where you had a traumatic birth or something like that. But most everyone on this earth is born into a spiritual state. So the problem is we start living life, and we talked about it in our last broadcast. There are things that happen to your sovereignty and to your consciousness, conditioning layers of just living life and having tough interactions with people, having people tell you who you are and whether or not that's true. So the idea is you get these impediments or these blockages. So the first thing to do is to identify that you actually have these. And so, the symptoms of this are, people I talk to usually say, I feel stuck right now. I feel like I've done all these things. I've learned how to meditate. I do yoga. I do this spiritual practice or that spiritual practice. And I've done all these things, but I feel stuck, like I'm not getting anywhere. And that's the perfect time to look inward and to look at what kind of resistance you have right now. Because, you don't have to be a guru to become spiritual. These gurus did not become spiritual doing their practices that they're doing. They're doing their practices to maintain it. So they did. It's like they've gotten to that quote unquote mountaintop, but in order to stay there, they understand they've got to do certain things. It's very unusual. I don't know of anyone who's done all these practices and not gone through some sort of level of spiritual inner work without, achieving the spirituality. So what are the types of resistance or blockages you can have? Mental resistance. So these are thoughts. These are everything from belief systems to self-defeating thoughts. Those two things alone are the ones that can be the biggest blocks. So just not even believing that you can achieve a spiritual state or spirituality, that's a pretty huge block right there. But believing that you're not good enough to be spiritual, to live in a higher vibration, that's a huge one as well. And so those are the two biggest ones. There's a number of other variations of those, but that's basically it. Emotional resistance is the second set of blockages, and those can be triggered or induced by trauma, or just less than trauma, just daily interactions with people, anger, heartbreaks, things that make you kind of recoil and defend yourself and to go into your shell and not expand outward. And these things can lie dormant for years, and they can build up, and they can slow your energy down, and they can start blocking your energy to where you do feel stuck. And then there's the third kind. Wendy and I have spent a lot of time talking about these energetic blocks. Energetic blocks can be there because of the mental or emotional blocks. They go hand in hand, or they can be an attachment. And I'm not going to get into that today. I mean, attachments, cordial attachments, all that kind of stuff. We talked about them in last episode, but we've also talked about them in the energy management, the spiritual protection, I believe, episode. We talked about them multiple times, so no need to really talk about them today. So all of these can be self-induced, but the third one, energy block, some of these can be out of your hands. So if you do have an attachment or an energetic parasite, that's something that you might need help getting removed. But the other two, the mental and emotional resistances, those are things that we can remove ourselves with some inner work. Is there anything you'd like to comment on or add at this point, Wendy?
No, you're just so on track, Gregg. And a book that's coming to mind for me is The Emotion Code
Yeah.
by Dr. Bradley Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
And just because, yes, we can get wounded and just put up a heart wall
Yes.
as a result of experiences that were just really challenging or seen as negative for us. And if you can reframe negative as truly a learning opportunity, I know that's easy to say when you're not in the thick of it. How is that job loss? How is that relationship ending that you didn't want to end? Or how is that car crash? A learning opportunity. But they're just things that take you out of flow for that moment, that time period. And then it's just choosing your attitude. Okay, why is this happening for me rather than to me?
Right.
And then you can get right back into your spiritual flow and your spiritual state the best you can.
I was just talking about this saying just earlier today, but there's a saying in the healing community that you have a choice. Your disease or your experience can make you bitter, or it can make you better.
And that's a great expression. Yes.
But literally the choice is yours, and that there's no two ways about it. Either you will choose to become bitter, or you will choose to become better. And becoming bitter is a form of fight or flight. And fight or flight does not ever turn into healing unless you transpose it, transmute it. So let me move on to the next slide here, Wendy.
Okay, well, wonderful. Well, I just wanted to bring up some examples because examples can always help make it real. So what I see in past life regression is a lot of uh, just beautiful visioning can come up during people's sessions. I'm just always so impressed, and it doesn't have to be someone who meditates often or at all or has had a past life regression before. But just as we work together and raise our vibration and frequency and really bring in our higher selves into our bodies and get nicely grounded, and then call in the guides to be supporting our higher self, to be supporting our soul, people can just have profound information come up, and they can get the answers to their questions that they've never been able to figure out. And that's wonderful. But what can happen is then resistance can come up because it's like, oh my gosh, am I making this all up? So that ego, that left brain, that overthinking, overanalyzing can just rear its head out of old habit and out of fear, basically. I notice this coming up the most often if someone were to recall what may be a historic past life, a biblical past life, or a famous or infamous past life. And those can really shake people. So I just want to reassure you, anything you see during your own meditations, during your own dreams, just try and be kind and gentle with yourself. Don't critique yourself and go, oh my goodness, how dare I think that, and that's got to be wrong. Who am I to think that? Because just a lot of these things lead back to feeling I'm not enough, and that's where a lot of the issues come in with not being able to stay in that wonderful state of grace, that state of flow, and that's that resistance to the spiritual state and progress, etc. So even if you feel that there's a historic, because that's a big deal, to be able to read about yourself in history, to have possibly been a historic figure, and you may also have been someone else close to that person, to that famous person, or possibly that biblical figure. Any of that's possible, that you were simply there at the same time and are remembering being the famous person when you first start, because it's kind of like a time date stamp of how to remember that timeline. So for instance, just as an example, people who recall Cleopatra and Mark Antony's timeline, they weren't necessarily Cleopatra or Mark Antony, but it may be just getting you to like dig a little bit deeper, that sort of thing. So again, just be kind to yourself, be kind to other people. If they're thinking, oh gosh, what if this really was a past life of mine? And yes, it can be fantasy. Don't chide yourself. There's nothing wrong with fantasy. If you think of fantasy as a sort of positive visioning, it's a really big deal. That's how many wonderful things get accomplished. Just like an athlete, if they can't vision all the steps and it really flowing very well, and let's say they're making that high jump, if they can't picture like all the small steps that lead to that and just see themselves like sailing over that bar, if they can't see that at all or feel that in their body, they're unlikely to be able to do it physically because they can't vision it. Also, we can be tuning into the collective consciousness, and that's okay too. We're all here, we are all one in a certain sense, so that's fine too. So all this wonderful theory got put to a really tough test for me back when I was first starting to wake up spiritually back in 2010, 2011, so 10 years ago or so. And I started having all these experiences and dreams and just visions of Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene, there's just been a lot of misinformation put out there regarding who she really was as a historic figure, and I just really didn't know what to make of it. I'm like, why does all this Mary Magdalene stuff keep coming up for me? So I found this wonderful book called the Magdalene Manuscript. It was channeled by Tom Kenyon and uh, recorded, and his wife Judy Sion helped put it together. And that helped me a lot because I could really feel that energy more and more and more. And so I started playing with the thought of, oh, gee, gosh, could I have actually known her? And I knew that wasn't it. I knew there was a deeper truth to it, but honestly, I just didn't want to deal with it. So I was blocking the possibility of, gee, can I dare play with the thought of maybe I was Mary Magdalene? I personally believe timelines repeat and there can be more than one. It's not a contest. So if you feel you may have been Mary Magdalene, that can be perfectly valid too. Or if you feel another person who's done, tons of work with it and research and experiences and memories, perfectly valid. Not a spitting contest, people. Just not a contest. But as I read the book, what started happening was healers, different people that I really didn't know. It would just be like the very first meeting, or a friend who was quite psychic would say to me, "Are you doing okay? Because I feel like you're blocking a past life, and it feels like you're having a lot of emotional and physical angst as a result of that." And that was absolutely true. I was having a ton of pain. My hips were locked up. I was having a lot of trouble moving because I was blocking, exploring the possibility. So just give yourself permission to block the possibility. And as I was reading the book, I noticed right on, let's see if I can get this right on the camera in the right spot. Does it show the letters MM? Am I holding it right?
Yep.
Okay. So my guides were then saying, so I'm meditating. I'm like, what's about this book? I mean, this book is so beautiful. It's so meaningful. I'm like alternately laughing and crying. It was just so, so emotional for me. And my guide said, look at the initials. So I'm looking at MM, and they're like, no, we want to confirm for you your past life. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, look at it from a different angle, turn the page. So I'm like literally turning the page, turning the page, turning the page. Finally, I get it. Does it show now as WW?
Yeah.
Hello, Wendy Williams. So that was one of the things they used as a little proof for me. And I still was like, oh my goodness, could this really be true? So because I was so resistant, I was so stubborn, it took probably 4 different friends and healers to say to me out of the blue, I had not asked them the question, but they just started saying directly to me, I've been told to help you. Do you know you have a past life as Mary Magdalene? How may I be of service to you? Because you're really blocking it and it feels like you're in a lot of pain because of this just stubbornness. So I just was like, oh my goodness, to have people come to me unsolicited and bring it up, that was the proof I needed because I just wasn't going with it very well. So it was about a year of really starting to accept, okay, I do have a past life as Mary Magdalene. How do I sort out what does that mean to me? So I did do a past life regression. And it was incredible. Again, I didn't want to say anything to the therapist because I didn't want to influence her. I thought, hey, if it's meant to come up, if it's got the most energy, it's going to naturally come up. That's that's absolutely what happened. And the memories were so detailed. I actually have written an entire book about it. So that will be released in the future because it's the 3rd book in a trilogy. But just the detail was so amazing. So that's an example. Just get out of your own way. is my message. It shouldn't have taken me a year and, that many people to confirm it for me, but we just have to be kind to ourselves. So let me give you some examples of other clients, some of their examples, past lives that come up where you're in non-human form. Because to Westerners, just the concept of a past life, I may have had another past life, can be big. And then to understand, I may have had hundreds, if not thousands of past lives. Oh my goodness. Now the belief system's just getting wider and broader and broken open, and just letting go of those self-limiting beliefs. So when you start to introduce the possibility of, guess what? You may have incarnated on Earth, on other planets, in other dimensions, including the fairy kingdom, the dragon realm. I've had a lot of clients that have recalled being mermaids or mermen, and we've talked about that several times and have a meditation. So if you're drawn to that, or whales or dolphins, there is an episode on that. But again, that can just really be hard for people to really embrace. So I just want to give one example of that. I had a lovely gal who remembered being a fairy. And she'd always felt like she might have been a fairy, or multiple types of fairies, because there's earth fairies here on the planet. And there's also star fairies on other planets. But what came up for her, she saw herself being crowned, and she saw all the other fairies like bowing to her and bringing her gifts. And I started hearing this word Maeve, and I did not know the history. I did not know who the Queen of the Fairies was, and that her name was Maeve. But we both saw her during her session being crowned. And I was able to confirm for her, because she's like, oh my gosh, is this my ego? Or is this possible? Did I really have a past life as Maeve, Queen of the Fairies? It's like, I'm seeing it too. And again, I don't know this history. I wasn't raised with that Irish lore to know this history, but it was just a really big deal. And it was so neat that I was able to verify it for her. And just one other story like that, another gal, she was having just a neat session. We'd gone to the healing temple. She'd reunited with her guide. She'd had kind of an unremarkable past life, but she was just getting in the groove of how I do this. And then she went to another one. And it was interesting because she couldn't see her feet. And I started getting that little tingle, and my guides were like, not human. And she was describing herself down at the beach, down by the water. But she just couldn't relate when I asked her to look at her feet. And I thought, well, because she doesn't have any feet. So I just said to her, go into the water, just be in the water, just enjoy being there in the water. And I was wondering, goodness, is she possibly a mermaid or a dolphin, a whale? What's going on here? And I could see her, and she started saying, oh my goodness. Because when I asked her to go to her home, to the place where she lived, where she went was to an abandoned ship, because underwater, sunken, because she was a very large fish. So it was just so neat. And again, we were both seeing and hearing bits and pieces of it, which is just neat when you can have that experience together, and it can really help with, oh my goodness, is this real, or is this my ego? But there were things that came up, and it was just for her to feel how strong she was in this huge fish body, and how free she was in the movement. It just tied in with some of her human questions and concerns she had in this lifetime. So it just was wonderful to vision that with her. So those were just some of the stories that I wanted to share from a past life regression perspective. So just trust what's coming up. Certainly you can ask your higher self and guides and say, hey, this seems wacky to me. This doesn't seem possible. If this is really true, please show me more. Just keep telling me more, show me more, so that I know that I'm on the right path with this. So
Yes.
that's what I wanted to share.
Very cool. I'd also, Tom Kenyon's book, The Magdalene Manuscript, also had a big impact on me as well. So just want to recommend that to anybody who's watching.
Absolutely. It's just it's a tremendous accomplishment. There's just so much energy and power and knowledge in it. Whenever I reread it, I think it was the second time I reread it, I sat down on my living room couch and just got comfortable. I could feel so many beings of light. I could feel Magdalene come in. I could feel Yeshua, Mother. I could feel them like reading over my shoulder, like, yay, she's reading it again. We can be back in that energy with her. And I would keep like putting it down and like have conversations with them and just get to have my own experience too.
Very cool. So let's move on and talk about another
Yes.
book, another book that had a big impact on me personally. Have you read the Surrender Experiment?
I have not. I know multiple people, including you, Greg, have mentioned Michael Singer to me. And yes, I'm familiar with this book, but I have not read it.
I first was recommended to read The Untethered Soul by a number of people, which is it's a very short book, very good, that he wrote during the experiences of the Surrender experiment, which is unbelievable. While he was being sued and defamed publicly, and like this multi-million-dollar corporation that he had started was falling down around his ears, he wrote The Untethered Soul. So talk about just being in the flow, as you said earlier, and surrendering. So the gist of the Surrender Experiment is Michael Singer decided to do an experiment of just saying yes to everything that came into his life, to not surrendering, which is a pretty brave act. And he was being led into some very uncomfortable situations for him that ended up turning out like unbelievably well for him. He ended up, all he wanted to do was build a place in the woods in Florida and meditate. That's all. He didn't care about anything else. So anything outside of that was being pulled out of his comfort zone. And he kept getting pulled out of his comfort zone and into these situations where a police officer showed up at his house that his friends had helped him build. And he thought, oh man, this guy's Michael Singer was more or less a hippie looking guy. And he thought, this police, they don't like people like me. The cop came and said, hey, did you build this house? Because it was an unusually built house. And the cop said, I would like you to build one for me. And long story short, basically, it turned into a building company that Michael Singer started with his friends because he didn't say no. And he could have just run away and went at the sight of the cop, but all doors flew open and it just went on from there to where he started a software company, to having a multi-million-dollar company. To him, it wasn't just, the quote unquote American dream type of success he experienced. He met all of these spiritual leaders. And he had supernatural experiences along the way and just amazing epiphanies where he was able to, he had this idea that the voice in his head that told him, that was his form of resistance needed to be destroyed. That was his idea. A lot of people think that. And I think even some masters or gurus or teachers will tell you, try to destroy that voice in your head. And he said, no, that's still a part of me. I'm not going to destroy it. I'm going to slow it down to the point where I want to pay more attention to the fact that I'm the observer. So in other words, he was pulling himself all the way out to where his higher self is, or his oversoul. And then he started watching how he was reacting, and this blah 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 voice that was going on inside of his ear. So he was pulling himself out as a third person, and that's when he started having all these supernatural experiences. Anyway, Michael Singer, the reason I bring him up is because he's got a really great podcast about removing resistance, and he literally wrote a book about it. So I'm going to share after we publish this today, the podcast.
Perfect.
That Michael Singer has, but I'll cut it down to size for us and kind of give and add something on top of it, because this week I had a week where I experienced some blocks and some resistance, and I used this. I took my own medicine and his medicine, whatever. But actually added a little one ingredient to Michael Singer's medicine. And this, so anyway, the point is this stuff works. So let's walk through how you go about removing blocks. How do you get unstuck? Well, the first is to identify that you're stuck. And then the second is to identify that you have blocks. So this takes a little bit of rumination and introspection. So you can do it during a meditation or something, or just during a period of time where you're quiet and you're just paying attention to how you're feeling. So the first thing is identify what the blocks are truthfully. I mean, really, don't put them off. Don't think, oh, well, that one doesn't even count. They all count. So look at them and then realize what they are. I like the way Michael Singer puts it. He says, view your life more or less as a river, and that you've got these big rocks in the river and they are creating turbulence, right? So that's why do you have rapids in a river? Well, the stream's moving quickly, but the rapids are there because there's a bunch of rocks. So he's saying these blocks are like rocks. And
it's a great analogy.
It is. So is it easy to pull these rocks out? No, it's not. But maybe don't pay so much attention to the rocks themselves and trying to get them out with a bulldozer. Look at what the action is. What is the chaos they're creating? So this is the secret. He's basically saying is don't go directly after the blocks. Look at their effect. So realize that these blocks are actually signposts and doorways. He actually says, think of it this way. Don't think of these blocks as something that need to be destroyed. These blocks are the doors. This is the way to your spirituality. If you didn't have these blocks, because basically in order to become more spiritual, you do have to go through something. You have to go through an uncomfortable or a painful period. And if you didn't have these blocks, that wouldn't happen. So he actually says in his podcast, you should like this. you should
embrace them
and realize what a gift they are.
Because they are the path. When I'm seeing those huge boulders across the water that are creating that resistance, I can see them as the path.
Yes, they're the doorway to your spirituality. So, it's tough when you're in the middle of experiencing something uncomfortable or painful because you think, oh, how am I supposed to be grateful for this? But once you're on the other side, then you realize, oh, wow, yes, that was a great teacher. But so anyway, objectively examine how they feel and what's their nature and realize that they have a pull to them. Okay. So these blocks have this kind of energy about them, this pull, and this pull is causing you to leak energy by, resisting. So I mentioned this earlier today in the group healing circle. There used to be a board game called Mastermind in the 1970s, and it had a really great tagline. It said, minutes to learn, lifetime to master. And this is basically what this is about. This will take minutes to learn. The trick is to do it, right? So he says, instead of going after the big block, look at what is the disturbance and how it's making you feel. And I'll describe what I went through this week. I reached out to somebody who was experiencing a physical and spiritual struggle on Facebook. I reached out to that person, and that person responded very negatively, like not quite an attack, but basically let me know that I'd, pissed her off. And I actually asked if, a couple of people around me, like, okay, look at what I wrote here. Did I do something wrong? Because, that's the first thing. When you hurt somebody's feelings or you make them mad, you think, oh man, I'm a jerk. But, the witness in particular that I just showed said, yeah, no, this person basically is in a broken state right now because they're going through healing. So it's, a lot of times that happens when somebody is going through healing and they're frustrated, they lash out at those trying to help, or they are not taking any questions or advice when they're in that healing mode. They don't want to hear, especially on Facebook. Unsolicited advice is the last thing they want to hear. And, I had it when I was going through Lyme disease. I would be in the middle of certain treatments and people have said, have you tried yoga? Have you tried meditation? Have you tried, eating a vegan diet? I'm like, really? I've had this for 12 years. Do you think I haven't turned over every stone and I'm in the middle of that? And I wouldn't lash out at people, but I would get frustrated. But anyway, this friend more or less did a little bit of lashing out, and it bothered me. It more than I thought it would, because objectively I saw what was going on and the person was in a healing mode. I thought, oh, okay, well, this isn't about me. I didn't do anything wrong. This is just how the person's reacting. But it went deeper. There was something else going on with me about it. So I followed the steps here. I thought, all right, first thing I did was I tried to get to the root, and I thought, oh, this must be some ego thing, or I don't know. I do healing work. Is this something deep within myself about healing and healing work, or whatever? Is this something I need to heal myself? And then I took, Michael Sanger's advice. I'm like, I don't think I need to, try to lift the boulder right now. Let me just concentrate on how this feels. So how am I feeling right now? Well, I couldn't really put my finger on it. It felt like a mixture of, I was angry because when somebody gets mad at you, that's one of the first kind of reactive feelings you might have, like
defense mechanism.
I had a defensive feeling at first. And in the back of my mind, I was like, defending myself. Well, I should reach out and explain this, that, and the other thing. And, I'd written like 3 emails in my head to her. And then as I was stepping back, I'm like, what am I doing? I'm leaking energy. I'm leaking energy. I got to stop. So what do I do? So let me focus in on what's going on here. I'm having this defensive feeling. I'm having this, I don't know, just a number of other, sub feelings. So I sat there and I thought, all right, I'm just going to let it go. And it didn't go right away. It didn't go right away. So I did some other meditative things. Like I put all of the feelings in a balloon, and then I held onto the string and I said, hasta la vista, baby. And that helped quite a bit. But this is the added ingredient that I figured out for myself, that amazingly, this just a few hours ago, as I was describing this to the online group Healing Circle, another woman mentioned Ho'oponopono, which I'll describe in a second. And that was the missing ingredient. That was the icing on the cake, or that closed the door. It's unbelievably effective. So what I did at the very end was I let it go. And then I said, I'm sorry. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. Case closed. So for those who don't know what Ho'oponopono means or is, it's an ancient, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a philosophy. It's a
chant. It's a ritual. It's a saying.
Yep.
It's an ancient Hawaiian practice.
And the point of the practice is to end karma, is to unwind it, the wheel of action. Because look at the 4 phrases there. I'm sorry. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. All those are like the biggest emotions, the most positive emotions you can have. All of those are unwinding emotions. During healing, the idea of forgiveness and love, those are probably the 2 most powerful healing emotions that I know of. And I found myself reflexively, before even realizing it was Ho'oponopono, as I started digging down into what had happened, that I had made this person angry at me. And my first reaction was, I'm sorry. Even though I literally I didn't actively or intentionally or do anything to trigger it, but I did. I still did. She still reacted to my words. So I felt sorry about that. And then she reacted in anger to me, and that made me mad. And I realized, well, in order to let it go, I've got to forgive. And then when I was on a roll, then I was like, oh, wow, this is doing the unwinding. And I realized it was a lesson. So, people in these situations like this are always teachers. So I said, thank you. And then just to put the cherry on top, it was, and I love you. So Ho'oponopono is a powerful medicine. And that's the only thing I would add to Michael Singer's steps to removing resistance. So thoughts about that, Wendy? Anything?
Yes, a couple of things. What we resist persists. So we really do have to sit with those emotions and feel them and let them flow to be able to release them in a healthy way. I believe that's one of the main reasons we're here in a human body. And I believe that's what our guides are so intrigued by, and the angels are so intrigued by, because they don't go through that. So they want to learn from that and help us with that. And unsolicited advice, no matter how brilliant, how well meaning, it can just absolutely trigger people. And haven't we all been on both sides of the equation? Particularly if you have a lot of what's called prophet, PROPHET, past life energy, and you've been someone who's been a very powerful prophet, and you were able to see the future, you were able to see what was going on, you were rewarded for this, you were paid for this. We can then tend to be people who like to give advice. And it can be wisdom. It can be deeper than just, I'm not talking about the busybody, low level type of advice. It can be powerful, wonderful, on point wisdom. But if there's no place for it to land, it comes back as a shot across the bow.
Yes,
which was
absolutely
what,
right.
which was what you got. And it can be a trigger. This becomes a gender difference. There's a reason John Gray's Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus is a bestseller and has been for decades. And this is not meant as a slam in any way. We've all got divine feminine energy. We've got divine masculine. Again, I see that as a big part of our journey, is to balance those two within us. But if you are a woman and a man in particular is giving you unsolicited advice with the biggest heart, because men are from Mars and Mars is the fix-it planet.
Right.
Versus women, again, please pardon my generalizations. I want to say this gently and carefully. Women can want to be witnessed. I might want to come home. I've had a bad day. I just want to be able to vent and talk about it for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or I just need to cry because I am just so frustrated. And that's a really efficient way to process the emotions. But if your husband, your boyfriend, your father, your brother, your neighbor is going into this fix-it mode, it can kind of make you shrink down and go, I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. I just want you to hold space for me for a couple minutes. Listen to me, bitch. Let me get it out of my system. And then let's have a great dinner. It's done. But if men don't understand that and don't understand that dynamic, I used to have a wonderful boss, and he was really from Mars. He really wanted to fix things. So it was very hard to go into his office and tell him about a problem, because he would jump into action mode and he could do things as a director that I couldn't do. But it was kind of stunting for me. And it was also like a little bit embarrassing for me at times, because it's like, I didn't ask you to come in and save me on your white horse. I need to be able to work this out with this physician myself. without getting the lab director involved. I'm here to tell you what's going on. I want to vent a little, and then I want to talk about the best ways I think I can solve it. So I would just have to say to him, can you just hear me without jumping into action to fix it and solve it for me? I need you to back away from your phone and back away from your computer, because you're going to try and take action and fix them for me. So those are my thoughts on that. And I absolutely have been the person who's been there with the well-meaning, unsolicited advice. And I have just really, really learned it's not appreciated. And I'll more often, if I'm really seeing someone struggling or writhing around, I'll more often, say, I'm here for you. Is there anything I can do for you? And just leave it at that. And I've found that's a much better way than to give them the 3-point dissertation of here's how you need to fix that. So those are my thoughts.
Yes. Oh, excellent. Well, we have come to the end of our show today.
So please come join us on August 8th. August 8th is the annual Lionsgate, and it's a heart opening. It's a very powerful astrological, energetic moment every August 8, 8/8, when that Lionsgate opens. So we're going to bring you a special episode and talk about that at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And you can join us live in the Facebook group, the Waking Up Spiritually Facebook group for it, or certainly listen to the archive on the podcast apps, on wakingupspiritually.com, on our YouTube channel. And my website is wendyrosewilliams.com. You are welcome to request a complimentary 15-minute phone appointment and see how I may be of service to you, and see if you'd like to do a full session with me. And Gregg can be reached at his website, which is Gregg, Gregg, Kirk.com.
Great. We will see you at the Lionsgate.
Exactly.
Yes.
Onto more of this amazing summer energy. So Thank you, everyone. So appreciate you being here. So appreciate you listening, and the journey that you're on. Just want to appreciate that journey that you're on. Thank you.